Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the deep state, the private Western central bank, the corrupt politicians, they are trapped in their own doing. The patriots have brought them down this path, this economic path, which they can't get out of. Remember, they were planning to keep the entire system shut down for years. They thought the global economy would implode while everyone was sitting at home and they can just blame it on. They don't have that cover story. It's gone. They don't have the Great War. That doesn't exist. So what are people seeing? They're seeing the truth of this economy. They're seeing the truth of what's happening to the currency. What happens when people lose the belief that the currency is credible? What happens when currency starts to implode and people see inflation? Do people lose faith in the currency? Yes. What happens to the monetary system when that happens? It starts to fall apart. And I do believe we're heading down this path. I do believe that this was set up by the patriots. But once again, we have two sides now fighting to bring us to a new system. And it doesn't seem like the deep state, the private Western central banks, it doesn't seem like they're winning. How do we know this? Well, is everything shut down? Are you sitting in your house? Do they have helicopter money? Are you getting paid $800, $1,000, $1,200, $1,400 a month without working? Or is everything open? Can people shop? Can people go to restaurants? Are people at work? Are people at school? This is how you know their plan didn't work. But they just can't stop it. It's almost like turning a ship and saying, okay, stop it right there. Well, is the ship just going to stop in the water or is it just going to keep going? It's just going to keep going and you won't be able to stop it. That's what we're seeing right now. Now, when we look at fuel prices, remember, this is part of the deep state plan. Remember, they want everyone to think that fossil fuels, that's over and done with, too expensive. We got to go to green energy. It's not worth keeping around. But remember, the patriots wanted people to see something completely different. They wanted them to see inflation. They wanted to show them what the private Western central bank, what the corrupt politicians actually have in store for them. Now, think about Europe right now. Because of the problems with fuel, what are people experiencing? Well, they can't really drive many places. Food is very hard to come by. Deliveries aren't being delivered. And people are running to the fuel stations with extra tanks. Actually, I do believe there are limits now on the amount of fuel, almost like toilet paper. Now, if you look out in Europe, the gas prices are continually moving up. They have surged to new record highs. Out there, their surge is equivalent to $230 a barrel of oil. Think about it. Think about what they're experiencing right now. Is this going to come here to America? Of course, it always starts out overseas. Who's the reserve currency of the world? The United States. So yes, everyone experiences it first out in other places. Then it comes back to the United States. But we can see that all energy prices, coal, oil, gas, they're all moving up. And countries are having problems. Now, we know that this is part of the deep state, the private central bank plan to bring us into the Green New Deal. But without a cover story, this doesn't help them. It just makes things worse for them. And people are going to lose faith in the currency around the world. We'll be talking a lot more about that in a little bit. But first, what's very interesting is we know that Evergrande, they're having problems in China. And we're starting to see there's other companies that are associated with this, and they're having problems. A company by the name of Jumbo Fortune had a $260 million note coming due on October 3rd. That was backed by Evergrande. Now, right now, it's a liability on their books. There's no word that this has been settled yet. There are other companies out there that are having problems. Fantasia Holdings, Cynic Holdings, they all have the same exact problems. So this might be a cascading effect over the long term. But we see there are problems all over the place. And we can see that here in the United States, the Biden administration, they're having a big problem because people are seeing now the truth about the infrastructure plan, which has nothing to do with infrastructure. They're seeing the truth now about the American Families Plan because information is coming out about that. They're seeing that whatever he's doing, it does not benefit the people of this country. And this is why the polls have come out and they have shown that people are rejecting the infrastructure plan. Now, what's very interesting when we talk about the American Families Plan, I think we spoke about this before, but there's a provision requiring banks and other financial institutions to report on account holders' withdrawals and deposits. Now, Treasury Secretary Yellen, who's really still the head of the Fed, because that really doesn't go away, does it? She's still part of the Fed. She's just in a different position right now. It's all part of the same system. They're saying that we need to look at all of your transactions. If they're more than $600 and you're using your credit card or your debit card or however you're paying, they need to track all of that. Think about that for a second. And she said this is going to be a great way for finding out who's trying to evade taxes. Well, this sounds like it's something completely different. It sounds like they want to track everyone's purchases. They want to know what everyone is doing. Didn't we hear about this before? What is that called? Oh, right, the central bank digital currency. You see, this is prepping for that with the currency that exists today. But we can see there's a lot of banks, there's a lot of people that are objecting to this. We see that a coalition of 41 bank industry groups sent a letter to the House Speaker on September 17, warning that this plan is not remotely targeted to detect major tax evasion. A group of 23 state treasurers and auditors sent a letter to Biden and Yellen on September 20th in opposition to the plan, calling it one of the largest infringements on data privacy in our nation's history. This has nothing to do with tax evasion. If you go to the store and you buy groceries, if you go any other place and you purchase something, that has nothing to do with tax evasion. What they really want to do is they want to track everyone's purchases. They want to know how much is coming in, they want to know how much is going out, and they want to track it in a database. Just like if we had the central bank digital currency. You see, what they're doing is they're preparing everything, setting up their infrastructure for the central bank digital currency. So they can track everything that you do. Remember, they're looking to change the face of banking, which really means control the people, just like they do in China. Can you imagine if they have the ability to shut you down if you want to purchase something? What happens if you go into a gun store and they're tracking it and they're using the central bank digital currency and they see that you're trying to purchase a weapon and they say, you know something? I don't want this person to purchase the weapon, and they deny your purchase. What happens? Are you going to use cash? Well, you can't because we're on the central bank digital currency. They have full control of what you do. Now, link that to a social credit score. Link that to carbon credits. They have complete control over your life, and they're monitoring your life. Now, do you think this is going to happen? No, the people are going to object to this. Yes, maybe if we were in a great war, maybe if people weren't working and they're sitting home and people were dying, people would say, it doesn't really bother me right now because I have bigger things that I have to worry about. But today, everyone's completely awake. Today, everyone's seeing everything. Now, Trump, we know when he was in his presidency, he went ahead and he changed a lot of the globalist trade deals. And we know part of what he did was to bring back manufacturing to this country. And he put out a statement about the USMCA and how it's doing. He said, until recently, U.S. auto companies sourced nearly all their batteries overseas. USMCA changed that. Under the agreement, an automobile cannot qualify for a duty-free treatment unless 40% of the content, 45 for a truck, is manufactured by workers earning at least $16 per hour. Advanced batteries of this kind that will power new energy vehicles comprise such a high percentage of the value of these vehicles that it'll be almost impossible for auto companies to qualify them under the agreement without sourcing the batteries in the United States. And in order to take advantage of a longer transition time available under the agreement, most auto companies have committed to qualifying their entire North American fleet, regardless of where the vehicles are manufactured and traded. The result we are seeing in a renaissance in U.S. battery production. SK Innovations announced a $2.6 billion new facility in Georgia that will open later this year. And just yesterday, SK and Ford announced an $11 billion investment in Tennessee and Kentucky. Without the USMCA and the Trump administration's strong actions to push back against China's unfair trade practices, this new investment and the thousands of good-paying jobs that go with it would have gone to China or other low-wage jurisdictions. Worker-focused trade policies works for America. More of America's cars of the future will be built right here. Letting you know that his negotiation of the USMCA is bringing the production of batteries back into the United States. Can you imagine if he was able to wipe out NAFTA instead of just renegotiating parts of it because it was tied up in Congress? Can you imagine if we just scrapped that and we created all new trade deals? What would the country look like? But he's letting you know that manufacturing is coming back to the U.S. Biden is going to be sending manufacturing out of the U.S. Trump brought manufacturing back into the U.S. Big difference. Now, we know that a lot of the banks, they are now looking at cryptocurrency. We can see U.S. Bank, the fifth largest retail bank in the U.S., they're launching its own cryptocurrency custody service. We know that JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and many other banks are doing this because they're playing both sides right now. Remember, they don't know what's going to happen. They don't want to be wiped out. So they're going to be playing both sides because they don't know in which direction the currency is going to go. Now, what's very interesting is that Trump, he was being interviewed, and this came out on Yahoo, and they were talking about the U.S. dollar. And this is what Trump said. He said he believes that China's recent move to ban crypto is a warning shot to the U.S. to protect its currency. He added that Chinese President Xi Jinping wants to create its own cryptocurrency to dominate global markets in a bid to overtake the U.S. dollar as the world's leading currency. Now, let's think about that for a second. They want to create their own digital currency, which they've already done, and they want that to be the world's leading currency, the reserve currency of the world. Maybe, maybe not. But he said something else that's very interesting. He said, I am a big fan of our currency and don't want to have other currencies coming out and hurting or demeaning the dollar in any way. If you look at a monetary system based on the dollar, if you start losing credibility, all of a sudden you're going to lose that strong monetary system. We have to be very careful about that. So think about this. Think about what he just said about the credibility of the dollar, or of the Federal Reserve note. If credibility is lost, you lose the monetary system. Well, Trump has already told us that we're going to see inflation, which means people are going to lose faith in the Federal Reserve note. If people lose faith in the Federal Reserve note, because that means the value of that currency is decreasing and decreasing and decreasing, and it takes a lot more of that currency to buy the same exact item. If people no longer have faith in that currency, the Federal Reserve note, that's not the U.S. dollar, it's the Federal Reserve note. What happens to the central bank's monetary system? It starts to fall apart. Now, are there other currency systems that can be used where people have faith in it? Yes, there's gold and silver. Yes, there's cryptocurrency. Yes, there's other currencies that can take its place. And I find this very interesting because we know that inflation is coming. We know that people are going to see this. We know that the credibility of the Federal Reserve note is going to start to implode on itself. The same is going to happen with many other currencies around the world where the private Western central bank controls them. If people are no longer looking at these currencies and no longer have faith in them, the credibility drops. And if the credibility drops, well, the monetary system goes because the people no longer want to use this currency. If people no longer want to use this currency, there needs to be another currency to replace it. Now, is it going to be the private Western central bank? Or is it going to be something the people decide to use? Is it going to be gold? Is it going to be silver? Is the Treasury going to create their own currency, maybe peg it to gold? Are they going to use cryptocurrency? Is there going to be a combination of all of this? And I do believe this is what Trump is trying to say, that people are going to lose faith in the private Western central bank currency. This will then destroy the monetary system. And yes, something else will take its place. And I do believe we're heading in that direction, and it's getting closer and closer every single day. And I do believe that people, in the end, they're going to make the final decision. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, the deep state, the corrupt politicians, big tech, Facebook, the invisible enemy, they are now preparing for the fallout. Yesterday, we had a massive communications blackout. Facebook went down, Instagram went down, WhatsApp went down. And it was because of a configuration error. Now, think about that for a second. Someone in Facebook applied a new configuration and brought down the entire system. What do you think this was all about? They're preparing the narrative for the communication blackout. Now, remember, they have an agenda because they know what's coming. They have this whistleblower that's not really a whistleblower. This individual is part of their system. The reason why this whistleblower is there, it's for the internet companies like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, and they want to censor more. They want Congress to give permission to censor people. Why do you think they did this? They did this because the whistleblower was on 60 Minutes. Then we had a Facebook outage. Then this whistleblower, the next day, was testifying in front of Congress. They had a crisis. People heard Facebook. People heard whistleblower. People wanted to hear what this person was saying. This is exactly what their plan was. It was to prepare everything for the communication blackout, to set the stage. This is what they're doing. Now we're going to watch Twitter, YouTube, and the rest all fall in line and agree with this. They're going to start off with censorship. They're going to start shutting down a lot of different things, but that is not the only reason they're doing this. Remember, the patriots are going to be producing information. What happens if they produce things that have to do with crimes against humanity? And they produce documentation that has to do with corrupt politicians. Are they going to use the new regulations, the new rules to censor people? Of course they are. They want to stop that information from coming out. This was a setup from the very beginning. They're planning for what's coming. They know it's coming, just like we know it's coming. This was no accident. Everything is moving forward right now. The Patriots, they know the playbook. They know that they were going to do this. And we'll be talking a little bit more about this a little bit later. But first, let's talk about how the media, how they usually tell two different stories for the same exact thing that's happening. Remember the individual, Kirsten Sinema, where she was followed into the bathroom? Someone was filming. And remember Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was speaking about AOC? Well, we have two different tweets. One for Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it says, Marjorie Taylor Greene targeting AOC isn't just harassment, it's dangerous. And then from the same exact company, Jezebel, they said, absolutely bully Kirsten Sinema outside of her bathroom stall. Same exact thing, two different stories. You can see the fake news. You can see it very, very clearly. And this is not the first time. We have seen this before. Now, what's very interesting is that Hunter Biden, he was supposed to get rid of all his investments with China and many other countries. Now, Emerald Robinson, she was speaking to Jen Psaki during a press conference. And we've known from reports that Hunter Biden still has not gotten rid of his investments. So Emerald asked Jen Psaki a simple question. She asked Jen Psaki, hey, did Hunter Biden get rid of all his Chinese business dealings? Jen Psaki got a little angry, a little pissed off, and she said that, listen, you're going to have to speak to Hunter's representative because he's not part of the administration. But this ties back right to his father. So Emerald Robinson put this out, and she tweeted the following. It's day 358 of Hunter Biden being unable to sell the Chinese assets after his father made a pledge that there would be no foreign business dealings. They're not getting rid of that. They're not transparent. They're not getting rid of that. They're not bringing the country together. Everything that they told you they were going to do is what? It's always the opposite. And we can see it now very, very clearly. See, before they were able to hide in the shadows, hide in the dark, they used to have a long period of time where people wouldn't notice things. But since their plan right now is behind schedule, since they're trying to catch up, they have to move very, very quickly, or the entire system completely falls apart. Because remember, they set it up not to last that much longer. They thought they shut down for many, many years, and people would notice the difference because a lot of people would commit suicide, action they were going to receive. You wouldn't be able to get food on the shelves. You wouldn't be able to get basic supplies. And they thought, oh, great, we're going to reduce the population. And after 8, 9, 10 years down the road, we can just move people into where we want them to go. Is that happening? No, it is not. Now people can see it all because now they don't have that time. They have a short period of time and they can't stop the ship from turning. Once they started turning the ship, that's it. It keeps going and going and going. Now, what's very interesting, we know that Biden is the most popular president in U.S. history. That's a joke, by the way. And he was driving down the road in Howell, and there were people lined up on the street, thousands of people on both sides. And as his motorcade came down the street, people were waving their flags. So great to see him. Except they weren't happy to see him, and all the people were Trump supporters. And the sign said, F. Joe Biden. So the most popular president had Trump supporters on both sides of the roads, all the way down the road, waving the flags and booing. Where's his people that voted for him? Can anyone find them? No, they can't. Why? Because he's not the most popular president. They cheated. And this, when you see this, you can see it very, very clearly. And it's getting worse and worse as time goes on. And we know that their plan, the deep state plan, part of it is to bring as many illegals into this country as possible. Remember, Trump, with the legislators in many, many states, they've been changing the voting laws. And the deep state players, they've been bringing in people because, yes, for part of their agenda, they need them to vote. The other part is they want to make this a third world nation. So they're having swarms and swarms of people come up to the border. Now, Greg Abbott is out there in Texas saying Texas National Guard is gearing up at the border for increased caravans attempting to cross the border policy. They're preparing for 60,000 Haitian migrants. Now, think about what's happening right now. Everyone's like, oh, this is terrible. Yes, it is terrible, but the country has a front row seat and they're watching the plan play out. This isn't just about bringing humans. That's what you're witnessing right now. And people see this very, very clearly. Now, what's very interesting is that Biden, he tried to go to the Supreme Court to stop the funding of the border wall. But the Supreme Court has now ordered the lower court to reconsider funding the border wall. So Biden loses at the Supreme Court, and they're pushing it back down to the lower court to reconsider the funding of the border wall. This is very interesting. Everything that Biden tries to do, it backfires on him. Now, we know that Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and yes, other providers that were having problems, but it was mainly Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. They were having a problem. And coming out of Krebs Security, they explained what they thought happened, that there was a border gateway protocol record, and it seems that it was replicated, and it didn't replicate correctly, and it took away the map telling the world's computers how to find its online properties. And that has to do with the DNS records. This is why people couldn't find Facebook. Now, Facebook, they published their response, and they said, our engineering teams have learned that the configuration changes on the backbone routers that coordinated network traffic between our data centers caused issues that interrupted this communication. This disruption to network traffic had a cascading effect on the way our data centers communicated, bringing our service to a halt. So think about what just happened right now. Remember, these big companies, they don't just roll out a configuration change. They have a testing lab where they test this, where they simulate the real world. So this doesn't happen. So to me, it seems like something else happened during this time period. Now remember, as this happened, Zuckerberg, he lost about $6 billion from the Facebook crash. But this coordinates very, very interestingly with the whistleblower who was testifying in front of Congress. And her testimony was talking about how they need more regulation, how we need to tackle hate speech, how we need to do all of these things. Because a lot of what we're seeing on Facebook, it's a national security issue. And she went on to say the following, that she believes that Facebook's consistent understaffing of the counter-espionage information operations, speaking to other parts of Congress about that, and I have strong national security concerns about how Facebook operates today. Plus, they're talking about domestic terrorists in this country. They're talking about how do we stop all of this. Now, it sounds great on the surface, but really, what are they talking about? Well, Brian Cates put this out on Telegram. He says, Congress will now move to urge Facebook to censor speech on its platform, even more to deal with its growing threat of domestic insurrection, maybe even pass a law or two. Now, I do believe this is going to go a lot further. Now, very interestingly, that we mentioned this yesterday, this individual who's the whistleblower, well, she works with the Democrats. She donated to the Democrats, and it seems that the top Democratic operative, Bill Burton, is advising her. This was a setup from the very beginning. So let's see if we have all this right. In less than 24 hours after the Facebook whistleblower appeared on 60 Minutes, Facebook went down. Did the deep state need a crisis to bring attention to the whistleblower? Yes. Why would they need this? Well, they need a crisis to push their agenda. Employees were locked out of the office. The offices most likely had a limited amount of people there because of what? This is setting the stage for the communication blackout. Someone from inside Facebook updated the company's border gateway protocol records, and the configuration was wrong, and it had a cascading effect. And there weren't actual people or a skeleton crew inside of Facebook, and other people couldn't get in, And it just kept going. So they set the stage that Facebook can now go down. Your data safe, your information safe, but you will not be able to get Facebook. See, it happened once, it can happen again. So they just set the stage. Then the whistleblower appears in front of Congress explaining how Facebook is not doing enough to tackle problems that have to do with hate speech and the rest. This allows for censorship moving forward. Remember, will there be Maxwell? Think Epstein. What happens if this information is published? Will Facebook be able to censor it with the new regulations? I do believe so. What happens if it includes high-ranking politicians, movie stars, sports players, and royals? Well, with the new regulations, will they be able to censor it, this information? Of course. See, all of what they're doing right now, it's about protecting themselves. It's about censorship. This is why they want the regulation. It's not to benefit the people. It's to benefit themselves. What about the national security issues and things happening, like riots? And there are other people reporting that, wait a minute, this isn't Trump supporters. This is Antifa out there. Will they censor those individuals? Will they only want the fake news to report on what's going on Facebook? Absolutely. They're going to try to censor as much as they possibly can. So did they get the green light for all of this? Of course, because they know what's coming. We know that Twitter, YouTube, they're going to get involved. Because what have we just learned? Well, this is coming from Brian Cates. This was during the hearing. It says, Director of Policy Communications Lena Peisch has issued an official response to the allegations made by former Facebook product manager Frances Haugen. Today, a Senate Commerce Subcommittee held a hearing with a former product manager at Facebook who worked for the company for less than 2 years, had no direct reports, never attended a decision point meeting with C-level executives, and testified more than 6 times to working on the subject matter in question. We don't agree with her characterization of many issues she testified about. Despite all this, we agree on one thing. It's time to begin to create standard rules for the internet. It's been 25 years since the rules for the internet have been updated. And instead of expecting the industry to make societal decisions that belong to legislators, it is time for Congress to act. This is how the gatekeepers at Facebook, Twitter, and Google want to get their competition that no longer uses their gates shut down. They want Congress to pass new laws targeting Telegram, Parler, Gab, Getter, and many more, and all the new social media that they don't have much control over. They also want regulations to be put into place that benefits them, which allows them to censor. This is what they're doing because they want to control the information. This is why all of this came out. Now, I want to go back to post 896. This is March 9th, 2018. And Anon on the board says, are we going to have more freedom of speech on private public speech services or not? Please answer the question. It says 100% regulated. Some platforms will collapse under own weight of illegal activities. See, they want Congress to pass certain laws to help them. Remember, the deep state, the corrupt politicians in Congress, the big tech companies, they all work together. This was a setup because they see what's happening. So why do they need to do this now? Well, we know that Durham is going to be producing information. We know there's going to be election fraud information coming out. And we know that there are people out there that are going to receive this information. Now, a lot of the people have transferred out of Twitter, out of YouTube, out of Facebook, and they are on other platforms. So they want to censor Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. They have control over that, but they don't have control over the other platforms. This is a huge problem because we've come to learn since what happened with Facebook, Telegram has received 70 million more people. It's becoming very, very popular. And this is why I said, in the end, they're going to find or figure out a way to bring down those platforms where there are a lot of people. Because if they see 120, 150 million people on Telegram or 200 million people on Rumble, they're going to make sure they bring those platforms down or censor them any way they possibly can. Because they know what's coming. See, Trump and the Patriots, they knew this playbook. They knew. Think about the post yesterday about the emergency alert system. It was a test. Well, test everything? Did they make sure that they can bring this down? Yes, it was just a test. They're preparing for the communication blackout. And this is how they're preparing. They're trying to change the rules in their favor. And when this fails, because it will fail, what do they do next? They shut everything down. Down she goes. Because when you can't control the flow of information, you shut the information down. This is just the beginning stages. Now, what's very interesting is we know that the North Korean war that they wanted to have during the 16-year plan, it's not working out too well with them. Now, doesn't mean they're not going to try. They're going to try, but they're also trying to push war with China and Taiwan. Now, this is coming out of Indo-Pac. This is October 4, 2021, and it says 4 carriers and their air wings operating together in waters southwest of Okinawa as waves of Chinese planes harass Taiwan. For the first time, air wings of 2 U.S. Navy and 1 Royal Navy carriers flight together, UK, USMC, U.S. Navy, and yes, they give the airplanes that are associated with this. They're all there, and they're there for a specific reason because of what China and Taiwan are going through. Now, what's very interesting, this reminds me of Post 38. This is November 2nd, 2017. It says 4 carriers and escorts in the Pacific. Why is this relevant? To prevent other state actors from attempting to harm us during this transition. Russia, China, or conversely, all 4 North Korea, or all 3. Think about this for a second. This was November 2nd, 2017. Next month, this will be what? Of everything happening. Note increased military movement. Note National Guard deployment starting tomorrow. Note false flags. Follow Huma. Prepare messages of reassurance based on what was dropped. Here to spread on different platforms. The calm before the storm. I do believe everything is in motion right now. And we're getting prepared for that big moment. Yes, the deep state, they're getting prepared. Yes, the Patriots are preparing. But again, the Patriots know exactly what they're going to do. They knew that they were going to do all this illegal stuff. They knew that they were going to push censorship like we've never seen before. They knew that they were going to bring down their platforms for a communication blackout. Because once they can't control the information, once the information is flowing and people are hearing it, they're going to have no other choice but to shut down everything. And we saw a small sample of that yesterday. And remember, we talked about it. It's either Facebook was going to stay down or they were going to build a narrative for the actual communication blackout. Well, it seems like they're building the narrative for the communication blackout. And I didn't think they were going to bring everything down because, remember, Trump, he's trying to get reinstated on Twitter. I think they'll actually bring down Twitter once Trump mentions a key phrase that we all know about. I do believe it's going to happen sooner than later. I don't mean next week or a month from now. We don't know the exact time. But I do believe he wants to get onto Twitter to communicate with the people and to send the message out so people understand what's going on. Facebook, think about Twitter. Most of the people, if you remember going back, they were going to keep people at home, working from home. That means they either have a skeleton crew in there or nobody's there. I think they have a skeleton crew in there. Which means if something goes wrong like this, a configuration error or something else happens, well, they can blame it on that. They can say, well, we don't have enough people in there. We don't know what's going on. We're going to have to figure it out. They've already tested it. People heard it, they believed it, and now they already set up the narrative. Now, the next time they can say, oh, another employee or a rogue employee decided to do the same exact thing. They've just set up the entire narrative for all of this. They're going to use this to their benefit. They're going to tell people, well, we don't have a lot of people in there because of what's going on right now. And remember, most likely we're going to have another variant coming out, which is going to keep people out of the offices.